Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Weeks, and I am the technical leader for the Webex for Developers program. Welcome to the technical workshop about elevating face-to-face meetings into the Cisco Collaboration Cloud. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can embed Webex features into web and mobile applications. So let's get into it. We're going to be going over a few of the different products from the Webex for Developers team provides to third-party developers. While we're going to spend most of our time going over the tools to embed Webex in a JavaScript environment, I will be touching on the mobile operating system SDKs as well. Today's agenda includes, we're going to be going over what Webex integrations are, the Webex widgets, Webex JavaScript SDK, Webex iOS SDK, Webex Android SDK, and wrapping things up. We all have existing apps and websites that we use to conduct our business day in and day out. I'm sure that you do a lot of collaboration in these platforms with other team members, customers, and clients. We've all experienced the break-in workflow where you're collaborating with someone and you really need a face-to-face call. Having to switch out of that platform and into the face-to-face platform could cause delays and even in some cases break productivity. And that's what we're here to dive into. The problem of how do we enable face-to-face meetings within our existing business applications? The Webex for Developers team provides us with a few different routes to do so based off your desire for customization and platform. But first, let's get into what powers all of our SDKs, and that's the developer integrations. Everything we do with the Webex SDKs is done on behalf of a user. If you start a Webex meeting with the iOS SDK, you need to identify and authenticate as that Webex user. This authentication is done via developer integration. Integrations are how you request permission to invoke the Webex REST APIs on behalf of another Webex Teams user. To do this in a secure way, the API supports the OAuth 2 standard, which allows third-party integrations to get temporary access tokens for authenticating API calls instead of asking users for their password. The general overview of the authentication workflow of an integration is this. First, you have to register your integration with Webex Teams on the developer portal. Next, your app must request the user's permission using an OAuth grant flow. Then, you can exchange the resulting authorization code for an access token. Finally, you use that access token to make your API calls via the SDKs. To create an integration, we are going to log into the developer portal at developer.webex.com. You can log in using your Webex account. Once you get logged in, you'll need to go to the My Webex Apps page. You can get to that page by clicking on your profile picture at the top and then selecting My Webex Apps. Once you're in the My Apps page, we're going to need to click Create a New App. On the Create a New App screen, we're simply going to click Create an Integration. The new integration screen will present you with a form to fill out for the details of your integration. There are also scopes which allow you to select what access you want your integration to have to your user's Webex account details. For convenience sake, we're just going to select Spark All for now, and this will give our integration full access to the user's Webex account. Once your integration is complete, you'll be giving a client ID and client secrets and an authorization URL. Depending on your use case, you'll be using some or all of this information to get to the Webex user's access token for use with the SDK. The client secret is only shown here once, so make sure to copy it down. Now that we have an access token from the integration, we now have the key to the Webex universe. So let's dive into the quickest way to get an embedded Webex experience, and that is with the Webex widgets. The Webex widgets allows us to quickly embed the Webex Teams experience into an existing web application with very little lines of code required. What you see here are the widgets in action. We currently have two widgets available, the Recents widget and the Space widget. We'll be focused on the Space widget since that allows you to have meetings with Webex Team Spaces and one-on-ones. So let's get started with the Space widget. This entire code that you see here is all that you need to get an embedded Webex Teams experience using that Space widget. Let's go line by line and dive into the important parts. This first section is importing our JavaScript bundle from the CDN. This has all the code needed to connect to the WebEx services and start our meeting. The next section imports the style of the widget and gives it its proper visual experience via CSS. This div is where our widget will be initialized into. Here, we are storing a JavaScript reference to that div that we just created above. This is where we actually create the widget. We are telling WebEx to create the widget inside the widget element that we stored in the line just above. Here's our access token that we generated from our integration. So instead of having access token here, we would fill in what the actual access token would be. And this is the destination that the widget will be opening. In this example, we are opening a widget to a WebEx Teams space, but you can also go directly to a specific user using the email address. With this code in place, our widget should open up and be ready to start a WebEx meeting. While the widgets provide a quick and easy solution for embedding WebEx meetings, the JavaScript SDK allows you to fully customize your experience. It allows you to have a completely integrated solution that feels native to your application. The trade-off is that it does require more code to get started, so let's go. The JavaScript SDK is a fully open source SDK from WebEx. It is available on GitHub. There are two primary methods of usage of the SDK. You can install it from npm to add to your web application, or you can use it directly from CDN. For our demonstration, we will simply be using the CDN version of the WebEx SDK. Just by adding this line of code to your website, you will have access to a WebEx object in the global browser namespace. When creating a meeting with the WebEx JavaScript SDK, the basic workflow is as follows. First, we want to initialize the SDK with an access token. Then we need to register that web browser as an SDK client to the WebEx services. Next, we're going to create a meeting with our destination. We're going to then join the meeting. Then we're going to add our local media, which is our camera and microphone. And then we're also going to display the meeting media on the page itself. Here's a quick sample of the code that it takes to initialize the SDK with the access token. You can see we're calling WebEx init and passing that access token that we generated from our OAuth integration. Then we're going to register the web browser at SDK client. We call the meetings.register function to tell the WebEx services that our browser is authenticated and ready to go. Then we're going to create a meeting. The meetings create function accepts a destination parameter, and that parameter can be a space ID, a email address, user ID, and there's some more examples on the documentation page. Then we join the meeting by just calling meeting.join. That tells our web browser to actually connect and start joining the meeting. Next, we want to add our local media. This code is a little bit more advanced, so I'm going to go through and check out the different lines. So this section right here is our media settings. So you can see that we can choose to receive audio and video, send audio and video. You can see that on our sample here that we've chosen not to receive any screen shares or send any screen shares. You can also change those settings to however you feel. Next, this block of code actually is getting our media streams directly from the browser. The browser is using a WebRTC to connect, and we'll be pulling the devices that are available to the browser. And finally, we're going to add those media streams that we got from our browser and add them to the meeting. From here, once you add the meeting, then you will be sending audio and video to the meeting. We also need to display the meeting media. So we want to display the remote video coming in from our meeting on our page somewhere. And that's what this code's for. So let's break this down a little bit. You can see that we get a media ready event on our meeting. And This tells us that, this block tells us that our local video is ready to go. And once we have that local video, we can display a self view on our page as well. This remote video is the remote video coming across the network, and we can take that and throw that into an HTML video element to display that remote video. We also need to hear our meeting, so that's what this remote audio section is for. So once you get a remote audio media ready event, then you have that you can wire up to an audio element on your HTML page. Once that's done, you should see a successful meeting. You can see that this is a very basic, unstyled example of the SDK, but you can go in. You should be able to connect to a WebEx meeting, and from here you can do your front-end work to give it the style that matches your application. But what if your business application lives on a mobile device? While a JavaScript SDK works on mobile browsers, you might want to embed meetings directly in the mobile app. That is where our iOS and Android SDKs come in. The WebEx Teams iOS SDK is the way to integrate WebEx Teams into your iOS app. The easiest way to integrate the WebEx Teams iOS SDK into your app is to add it to your project with CocoaPods. The development flow for the iOS SDK is similar to the other SDKs, with just a little bit of different setup at the beginning. First, we need to import the SDK via CocoaPods. Then we do our authentication again, and then this may sound familiar from the JavaScript SDK, but we got to register the device with the WebEx services, and then we make a call. Let's go through some sample code real quick to show how we can go about doing that. Inside your iOS project, import the WebEx Teams SDK library by adding the following line to your view controller file. This will give you access to the WebEx SDK from CocoaPods. Luckily, the iOS SDK has a method which will perform the authentication for you. You can see here that we're going to use our integration client ID and secret that we created earlier, and this will automatically open up the OAuth authentication flow for you. So unlike the JavaScript SDK, we have a built-in method here. Then we want to register the device with this sample code. We'll just call WebEx phone register. Once the registration is complete, we're going to make a call. The calls can be made to WebEx Teams users and devices, telepresence systems, SIP devices, and even regular telephones. If the user calls a telephone system such as an IVR, the SDK also supports DTMF transport so users can navigate the IVR menus. iOS users can also view the content shared from any telepresence system. It is a fully integrated collaboration SDK. You can see here on the sample code that we're calling phone.dial, and on this example, we're dialing it directly to a coworker. Once you're implemented all that code, it should allow you to create face-to-face meetings, WebEx meetings with the iOS SDK. We also have an Android SDK for our Android users. The WebEx Teams Android SDK also gives you the ability to embed WebEx Teams voice and video calling directly into your application. The WebEx Teams Android SDK, you can also connect end users from your app to any WebEx Teams app device and SIP device. Once again, our SDK workflow for the Android is similar to the other ones we've seen, but with just a little bit of a different setup, but the rest remaining the same. First, we want to integrate the WebEx Teams Android SDK into our application. Then we want to add the WebEx Teams Android SDK library. Once that's done, then we can go to the same flow as before, where we provide authentication for the user, register that device, register our Android device, and also then finally we're going to make a call with the SDK. First, you need to add the following repository to your top-level build Gradle file of your project module in Android Studio. You can see that this URL for Maven is where you can get that SDK from. And as you see below, we also have the Android SDK example that you can pull the code from. Now, you need to include the Webex Teams Android SDK library module as a dependency for your app. To do this, add the following code and configuration to the dependencies block of the build Gradle file as shown. You can see that we're compiling the Cisco Webex Android SDK as a dependency. And that should give us the Webex SDK Android SDK. Here again is where we're going to utilize our integrations client ID and client secret. Luckily, the Android SDK has a method which will perform all the OAuth authentication for you. As you can see, we're going to be calling the authenticator authorize. It's going to open up a new web view. And then once it's complete, we will have our authentication token and our SDK will be authenticated for that user. Just like in the other examples, you need to register to the device in order to send and receive calls. We do that by calling the phone register function. There's also a completion, so once it's registered, we know that the device is ready to go and make calls. These calls can be made to Webex Teams users and devices, telepresence systems, SIP devices, and regular telephones, just like the other SDKs. If a user calls a telephone system such as an IVR, the SDK also supports DTMF, so users can navigate the IVR menus as well. Completion of this code should allow us to create face-to-face Webex meetings with the Android SDK. Today, we saw all the different ways to enable face-to-face Webex meetings in our business applications. We went through creating an integration for the Webex authentication on the developer portal. We spun up a quick Webex widgets for browser-based meetings. We went through and customized and dove down a little bit more into JavaScript by using the JavaScript SDK to create custom browser experiences. We used the Webex iOS SDK and created iOS mobile meetings from our iOS applications. We also dove into the Android SDK for our Android users to make and receive face-to-face Webex calls. Here I provided some links to the developer portal, which has all of the SDKs and widgets that you need. Also the links for going into the developer portal to start creating our integration. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed DevNet Day.